Welcome to the McAlvany Vault, where we revisit classic shows and highlights from 2008 and on. While you're listening, remember to thumb this video up, share with your friends, and leave a comment or question down below.
The people who run Wall Street and the people who run Treasury and the Federal Reserve plus the international bankers know that the current system has ended. I think their main goal is to maintain some bit of confidence in the dollar, and everybody's helping to do that because everybody's holding these dollars, but everybody knows that we have to go to a new system.
Welcome to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. I'm Kevin Orrick along with David McAlvany. And David, today we have, of course, with us Congressman Ron Paul, who's an 11-term congressman from Texas. He's a leading advocate for freedom in our nation's capital. He's devoted his political career to the defense of individual liberty and sound money.
We're covering a lot of information, and a lot of the information we cover each week with our listeners is pretty dire. And that's just kind of the state of the world as it is, not necessarily the way it always has been or always will be. But we'd love to explore some things with you today which give some direction to tomorrow. And I just wanted to start reading a quote from the end of your book. Ours is not a fated existence, for nowhere is our destiny etched in stone. In the final analysis, the last line of defense in support of freedom and the Constitution consists of the people themselves. If the people want to be free, if they want to lift themselves out from underneath the state apparatus that threatens their liberties, squanders their resources on needless wars, destroys the value of their dollar, and spews forth endless propaganda about how indispensable it is and how lost we would be without it, there is no force that can stop them. If freedom is what we want, it's ours for the taking. Let the revolution begin. What do you think we can anticipate in the first 120 days of the next administration? Could you see foreign exchange controls, an Argentine-style seizure of retirement accounts? Will this be a bold initiation into executive responsibilities, or do you anticipate Obama easing his way in on a more low-key basis?
No, I think he'll be pretty aggressive. I doubt if he's going to take over the investment retirement accounts, even though I guess in his own mind he wouldn't mind doing that, but I don't think the country will be quite ready for that. I think he'll just do more bailouts. He'll do more of what Bush has been doing, and along with the Democrats in the Congress, and that means that it may be oriented more to bailing out the mortgage holder, the homeowner, and just passing out checks to the individuals rather than to the mortgage companies and to the banks and to the corporations. But I think they're going to spend a lot of money, a lot more money, and it'll be a big bailout package, and that'll come up. They'll even try to get that through even before the new session starts. But I think it's going to be a lot more of that. I think they probably are anxious to change some rules on labor law to make it a lot easier for the labor unions to get some clout. But I think the American people can expect bigger government, less freedom, more spending, more debt, more inflation, and no change in our foreign policy. In other words, we can expect that the Democrats will be very much like the Republicans and continue the process that we've been living with for these last 8 years, which have not been very helpful to us.
Well, President-elect Obama is filling out his cabinet and advisory positions right now, and Rahm Emanuels had just made a statement just recently saying, quote, "You don't ever want a crisis to go to waste." Do you think they're going to utilize this financial crisis to the best of their ability? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think they will. Just like the neocons got ecstatic over 9/11, now's our chance. The very first thing they said, we've been waiting for the chance to invade Iraq. So they jumped at it, and they jumped at passing the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was something that had been proposed before 9/11. And now there's a financial crisis. That's the way big government people operate. Yes, this is, for those who believe in bigger government, this provides an opportunity for them, and I think that's what you're going to see happen.
But you note in your most recent book that our Constitution was written to restrain government, not the people. And then you observe that government is always tempted to turn that maxim upside down. It would seem that the next administration is likely to continue on a similar course as the present Republican administration, expanding the role of government for our own good. Perhaps the themes will be different. Instead of protecting us from others, you mentioned the Patriot Act, perhaps our new benevolent leadership will be protecting us, from ourselves. How do you think this will be spun?
Well, there'll be more of it. Of course, we do a lot of that already. I mean, everything from seat belts to what we put in our mouths and into our lungs, that you can't do it without the government knowing exactly what we're doing. So a lot of that is going to continue. which means that even though when the Democrats took over the House of Representatives, I thought we'd have a better chance to maybe allow people to pick and choose nutritional alternatives and vitamins and all, but no, they were just as bad as the Republicans. So that's going to continue. People in Washington have very little confidence in freedom. They don't have confidence they give so little credibility to the average citizen that the citizen would not take care of themselves no matter what, economically or taking care of their own lives and their own safety. So they feel very benevolent that they're going to take care of everybody. And if they see an opportunity like what we have presently, they're going to take advantage of it. So I see very, very little chance that our government will shrink in size. The only positive thing we can say is more and more Americans are getting sick of it all. In spite of the election, I think there's a large number, but not a majority of Americans who are just tired of the whole thing, and they know that we can't continue in this process because we just can't afford it.
The question for you in that regard, it seems that younger people are aware of sort of a changing zeitgeist. The old world of the Republicans and Democrats and the somewhat farcical conflict between the two as we come into election periods. I think the vast majority of Americans, or certainly American youth, are asking themselves, is this for real? Can't we go back to something more basic? What we're really interested in is freedom or individual liberty. What did you see as you were on the campaign trail this last year?
I saw a tremendous response, and it was surprising but very pleasing to me that we got such favorable support on the campuses. And it didn't have to be the conservative campuses. As a matter of fact, we got as good a reception on the liberal campuses as ever. It was at the University of Michigan, of all places, that in the middle of my speech they started chanting, "End the Fed, end the Fed." They started burning Federal Reserve notes. And I never thought I'd see that day where college kids all of a sudden got interested in the Federal Reserve System. But I think the young people know that they're not going to get anything out of Social Security. A lot of these promises are coming to an end, and if you talk about responsibility and freedom of choice in their personal lives as well as their economic lives, and getting out of the system and not paying in the Social Security and advocating getting rid of the income tax, they can get pretty excited about this. And we got tremendous support. So that is where I came away being more encouraged, not discouraged, and it was from the campuses. So I think the young people are listening to the message.
Well, you put a number on the elimination of the income tax. You put a number on it right there in your book, which I thought was fascinating. Many people say, oh, my gosh, how in the world could they eliminate the income tax? How could we possibly have roads and bridges and a military? But you brought a great point out. It would reduce government spending by 40%, which would merely just take us back to 1997. Is that correct?
That's about right, and that a lot of us, I'm sure you as well, thought we were spending maybe too much in 1997. And yet if we had those same funds, we could have that much government without an income tax. And think of many years that we went before 1913 without an income tax, and our country grew. And we were prosperous, and we had sound money, and yet people believe that the world will come to an end if you don't have an income tax. And it is, of course, the worst of all taxes in my estimation.
The conversation that you are carrying on across campuses and across the country and in your role as a congressman really is not a partisan conversation. And I think that's what is encouraging to me particularly, is that it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're part of the Green Party or any other independent party, libertarian or across the board, there's some things that just make sense, and they should be a part of the political conversation we have. Not just what a particular political platform is and why you're signing off on this particular guy for the position, but we're taking it back to the basics. We're taking it back to root ideas, then determine the nature and scope of government.
Yeah, I think this was probably one of the exciting parts of the campaign as well, is that the crowds we got, and the crowds kept getting bigger, they were very diverse. They weren't, the Republican-looking crowd, the businessman that comes out to so many Republican functions. I mean, college campuses, and it was a cross-section. I just would be so excited about it. I said, it just looks to me like freedom is a popular idea. Freedom brings people together. We're not confrontational when we present this message, and it's the Constitution that brings us together. So you can. And we did talk to people who belonged to the Green Party and liberals who cared about civil liberties and a different foreign policy. And then conservatives would at least pay attention to the economics and listen to the whole message. But it really is unifying. I think the best way for the American people to understand this is we do have a pretty good understanding about religious freedom. Sometimes I think we get careless about it, but basically, we have various religions and we are tolerant. I wish at times we'd be more tolerant, but basically that is the case. But we're totally intolerant when it comes to social issues and lifestyles. And when it gets into the category of right and wrong, we have a role to play. We have a role to play as individuals, as parents, and as communities, and we can influence people and we can teach. But when it's dumped in the role of government to say, this is what you have to do with your life, or this is what you have to do with your money, it's one and the same thing. But for some reason, we divided freedom into two pieces, personal freedom and economic freedom, and then we have become divisive. We have the big government people who want to control all the wealth, and too many conservatives want to control our lives, and that's why we're fighting over this. And quite frankly, if we can just take care of ourselves, and if we want to change other people, change them through persuasion or teach our children the way we want them to grow up. That, to me, is so much better than turning that job over to the government.
Well, the scope and nature of government, you just mentioned that it's likely to grow. We're wondering, do you think we'll see a reversal of the executive office privileges that we've seen in the present administration? Specifically, do you see executive orders and signing statements becoming a thing of the past? Perhaps you could give us a little background on the appropriate use or potential actual abuse of, 1, executive orders, 2, signing statements. Maybe Obama's just a different kind of guy. Maybe he can resist the temptations of power that is outside and above the law.
I think the move toward a strong executive has been going on for 100 years, and neither party has done anything to curtail it, and Obama will like it. He might, issue different executive orders, and he'll repeal some of the executive orders. He'll cancel them out. But he'll use signing statements. If Bush got away with it, he's going to try to get away with it. And any restraint placed on the president should be through the Congress, but the Congress has no stomach for that. And that's the reason ultimately it's up to the people to demand it. But the people are pretty complacent too, and most of them are looking for safety and security, so therefore they're not going to do it. So the executive branch is going to continue to grow. Executive orders, there's nothing illegal about some executive orders if it's a proper executive function. If our president is given the power to manage the military, which he is, if he sends out an order, that's called an executive order. He's permitted to do that. But that isn't the way our executive orders have been used. Clinton could come along and say, well, those 40 million acres out west, you will not use them ever again for drilling, and they'll be off limits. And that's just with an executive order, So many, I would think 90-some% of the executive orders of the many recent administrations have all been illegal.
You're listening to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary at McAlvany.com, McAlvany.com. Well, being in the midst of a financial and economic crisis, we're wondering if this is going to make the 1930s look like child's play. Do you think that Obama is going to use FDR's playbook only on steroids to try to pull us out of the economic crisis? Or do you think now that we're such a debtor nation that that's going to be an unaffordable impossibility?
He's going to do whatever he thinks is necessary, and he's not bashful about using government and spending and deficit. But how much more can he do? The story yesterday was that we were asking the question, where did this $2 trillion go that the Federal Reserve created out of thin air and started passing out? And they tell us we don't even have a right to know where it went. How much worse can it get? But if they're capable, if the dollar holds up for a while longer, if $2 trillion doesn't work, they'll pump in $4 trillion. But the limitation will be by the marketplace. Eventually the market and the world economies will say, so far, we think it's just fine and dandy that you can create all this new money and help bail out people, and we love your dollar. They keep parking their money in the dollar, but that will come to an end. So if Obama comes in, as I suspect he will not only continue at this rate, but even expand it if he can, that eventually it'll be limited because people will lose confidence in the dollar. They've lost confidence in the financial system, but right now there's still a bit of confidence in the dollar that they're leaning on. If that confidence is lost, the ballgame is over.
We've heard some discussion of a Bretton Woods II, some sort of a new currency or monetary regime. And, with global inflation hitting levels in concert, never seen before, is there a possibility in the context of sort of a rewriting of the original Bretton Woods 1944 agreement, that one, the dollar plays second fiddle, is a part of a basket, or actually is completely upset with a variety of alternatives taking its place? No real strong standouts make the A-list, but I think you mentioned we do have confidence in the dollar to some extent today. From a political standpoint, the U.S. foreign policy that we've seen implemented over the last 8 years is despised. No one likes it internationally. And I think, the possibility for an upset of our current currency regime would be welcomed overseas.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I look at it this way. I think they know, those who are in charge, the people who run Wall Street and the people who run Treasury and the Federal Reserve plus the international bankers know that the current system has ended. I think their main goal is to maintain some bit of confidence in the dollar, and everybody's helping to do that because everybody's holding these dollars, but everybody knows that we have to go to a new system. So we did have the Bretton Woods from 44 to 73, and then to 71, and then that broke down. We've had the second Bretton Woods, so-called, up until now. But I think that's over, and now they meet here November 15th and start talking about the next one. But it's not going to be easy for them, but I imagine what they'll pick is a basket of currency. If they overdo the removing of the dollar, that may be too chaotic. I mean, they're treading in dangerous water, I think, because generally speaking, throughout history, to restore confidence into a system, you usually had to have a sound currency. And they're not about to announce that this new reserve currency that they're talking about is all of a sudden going to have a 30% backing by gold or something like that. That's not going to happen. So they're going to have a tough job putting confidence into this. And I don't think anybody, even those who believe they're in charge, can predict exactly what's going to happen.
In 1933, we had the FDR administration step in within the 90 to 120 days of office. Assumption, they were confiscating gold in line with the Trading with the Enemy Act. They only ever confiscated about 10% of the outstanding stock. We've always wondered, was that to signal to our foreign creditors that we're okay, just, again, to restore confidence? So let's flesh that out a little bit in terms of how do you sell to the world, not just the U.S., but to the world, a new currency regime that doesn't have anything sound to it. You mentioned the students at the University of Michigan who were saying, end fiat currency, end fiat, and we're burning Federal Reserve notes. It would seem that the king is obviously naked and without clothes to some extent. How can you have a new currency regime without something substantive behind it?
Well, it's rarely done. There was some skepticism about the euro coming into being, even though all the previous currencies that they brought together at one time had been linked to metals. So there was a lingering trust there, but they were able to pull that off. But the euro is not so much a good reserve currency now. Because the United States has a bigger economic system, we're richer still, and we have a powerful military. People would rather park their short-term funds in dollars. So I have no idea how they're going to do it. History's against them being able to do it, but they might be able to come out with something as a basket of currency made up of the euro and the yen and the dollar. But generally speaking, the people don't trust it who finally realize what's going on unless there's something behind the currency, and rather than these promises by politicians. If we can't trust our own politicians or our own central bank, why in the world would we ever trust a world central bank? It just seems totally bizarre to me.
Well, we've addressed some looming issues both on the political and the economic scene. Would love to know what your thoughts are over the next 4 years, getting through this first term with Obama. What should good men and women be doing about our body politic? How do we get involved? What does it look like to be living wisely in these times?
Well, everybody has a responsibility, and it will be different. I think the most important thing that all of us have is the responsibility to ourselves to try to understand what's going on, and that is self-education, understanding the monetary system and understanding the Federal Reserve and government, and then trying to influence others and being involved and participate in political action. Education is number one. Political action is number two. Some people don't like it, but I still think it's pretty important. Some people are teachers, and that is fine. Some people are financial advisors that tell people how to survive, because I think that is important, because the more people who understand what ultimate survival is all about, the better off all of us will be. We don't want just 2 or 3 of us out there trying to survive. We want everybody to understand so there's more. But I think along long terms of those young people I talk to on trying to get a new generation to understand what the principles of liberty are all about and what America has been all about, and why if we follow the Constitution, we'd be a lot better off. And for that reason, that is the reason I continued my campaign that ended last June into something called Campaign for Liberty. And we have an organization. We have a lot of people belonging to it trying to promote both education and political action. So, but every individual probably has a different role to play, but I think everybody has to do something if they do care about our country.
Well, Congressman Paul, I can vouch for the fact that you're being humble about recommending your own book, but the book is called The Revolution by Ron Paul. It's a manifesto. And basically, it is a great primer on the things you're talking about for people who don't want to necessarily read volumes and volumes of history. Your chapters are, the false choices of American politics, foreign policy, the Constitution, economic freedom, civil liberties, and then money, where you go into the Federal Reserve, interest rates, and how that can give a false indication to an economy and suck it into a huge crisis like we're in now. I would highly recommend that our listeners get your book. When you were writing this book, was your intention to give marching orders to the next generation?
Well, I don't like to describe them as marching orders, but I would call them very strong suggestions. I'm so convinced that you have to persuade people. We have to convince them of something. So I just would describe it differently, but in a way that is just trying to get people energized and excited. But, just like in the campaign, a lot of money was raised in the campaign. People come up and ask me, how did you do it? What kind of organization you have? How did you understand the Internet? And I said, it didn't happen that way. People got excited about the message, and they spontaneously joined in and organized their own meetup groups. And that's what I liked. I like this spontaneity and excitement. I feel like I might be just one to spread a message and try to get people excited. Then people will find a job.
Well, I tell you, reading through the book, it really is that. It is inspirational. And you end it with a list of books, which is absolutely fabulous. About 45 or 50 books, which should be in any personal library, and not just on the shelves, but read and underlined and highlighted. And they offer a lot of background, both to, and you even call the list, a reading list for a free and prosperous America. I think that's something that anyone can get behind, a free and prosperous America. Who's against it? Who's for it? I think those are obvious answers. Really appreciate you putting the time into distilling the message and giving some thoughts as to how we move forward from here. So it is a great primer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, we hope that you are not considering being out of politics anytime soon. 4 years from now, probably more like 2 years from now, we'd love to see another bid for the White House. And you will have support, and I think probably an overwhelming groundswell of grassroots organization, which occurs not 2 years from now or 4 years from now, but right now. And that's what we would encourage people to be aware of, is being educated, understanding the issues, understanding leverage in the political process, where to push, where to pull, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that you have to line up and line out right now.
Well, I don't know exactly where I'll be in 2 years. I know that I got through this election pretty well since I didn't have a Democrat file against me, which I was pleased with. But I feel like I've been doing the same thing since I first started in the 70s, and that is campaigning for liberty in the true sense of the word. And I've done it in different ways, in office, out of office, through educational foundations, through investments, and all these things, all with the idea that it's a great message, and that's what has made our country great. But I've been fearful that we have been slipping away from it, and too many people have forgotten exactly why America was great and free and prosperous. Very much encouraged that young people are very open to this message.
You quote Robert Taft early on in your book saying, when I say liberty, I do not simply mean what is referred to as free enterprise. I mean liberty of the individual to think his own thoughts, live his own life as he desires to think and to live, the liberty of the family to decide how they wish to live, and they want to eat what they want to eat for breakfast and for dinner, how they wish to spend their time, liberty of a man to develop his ideas and get other people to teach those ideas, if he can convince them that they have some value to the world, liberty of every local community to decide how its children shall be educated, how its local services shall be run, who its local leaders shall be, liberty of a man to choose his own occupation and liberty of a man to run his own business as he thinks it ought to be run, as long as he does not interfere with the right of other people to do the same thing. This is a message that carries. It's a message that has heart and certainly makes a lot of sense logically, and it's something that is nonpartisan or is supra-partisan. It would include and should include both Republicans, Democrats, and every other party on the planet. So thank you for distilling that for us. Thank you for being a guest today. We'll look forward to perhaps having you back again.
Thank you. Nice being with you.
Well, you've been listening to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. I'm Kevin Orrick along with David McAlvany, and we can be found at McAlvany.com. That's McAlvany.com. Or call us at 800-525-9556.
This has been the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. The views expressed should not be considered to be a solicitation or a recommendation for your investment portfolio. You should consult a professional financial advisor to assess your suitability for risk and investment. Join us again next week for a new edition of the McAlvany Weekly Commentary.